Right, that's the first one up. My apologies for all this because there's going to be 3 or maybe 4 parts, but I don't want to miss anything. If I'd had an hour or two, taken an hour or two, I could have digested it, but I don't want to do that, to be honest. So, if you watched the first one, when Who Decided What Now, or something like that, you'll know the police have already lied once about my impending prosecution, which has now been sacked, obviously. So, investigation. The investigating officer contacted me to inform the complaint was now out of sub judice and was being looked into because it's been dropped. The case has been dropped against me, so my complaint is now active. Mr. Dick has asked to provide any details of any requests he had made to DS Cook in order to establish what information and not disclosed to him. The investigating identified specific information that Mr. Dick has claimed to have withheld in order for his second allegation. Not very interesting. Since making this request, Mr. Dacus has emailed the investigating officer on 4, this is Mick Gilbert, who I mentioned in the first one, 4 occasions. Each email response was hostile, sarcastic or uncooperative. Well, maybe because you're telling me to do your job. You know what I mean? Why should I go around looking for letters and emails? What are you getting paid for? And these were concurrent with an email to DS Cook, which is considered as to be deliberately offensive. Don't recall insulting him. The emails need not be reproduced here, but are attached to Appendix B for reference. Well, I have a lovely list of. This is what they've withheld. This is what they've not included, and this gets better as well. Believe me. So they've just withheld all the stuff that's going to make them look guilty, basically, because they clearly don't want it in the public domain. So this is DS Cook's account. I was asked to look into the allegations of harassment of an HDC employee, Ian Sims. Mr. Dacus has for some years sent emails with allegations of corruption to heads of local government, PCC, Chief Constable, Mr. Ginogly, Joe Lancaster, HDC, as well, because I've never had a reply, really. His emails are sarcastic and to me vexatious. We got there. I thought Acrobodius might be a one-off. His allegations against the council have been investigated fully previously. No, they haven't. But he has sustained a complaint against the establishment. I visited HDC solicitor Shirley Tracy and agreed a strategy as Mr. Dacus wished to exercise his right to inspect the council's financial records, and they feared violence from him after his emails. Believe me, kids, if there was violence on the cards, it would have happened already. I obtained a detailed statement and exhibits from Ian Sims, the case being that Mr. Dacus was harassing an individual, as a company cannot be harassed as such. Alright, so why hasn't everyone else complained about it then? Mr. Sims complained of Twitter and LinkedIn invites from Mr. Dacus also as part of the harassment. But the case centred at the direct and copied in emails that had been threatening by nature. So remember, if I send you a LinkedIn invite or start following you on Twitter, I'm obviously, that might be a threat. Remember that. My plan was to initially arrest Mr. Dacus for Section 4 Public Order Act. Oh dear. But inquiries showed that Section 2 simple harassment was appropriate. Mr. Dacus had been given a harassment order notice by PS Andy Street, police, yes, which hadn't been signed. Not that there is a lawful requirement for a harassment notice, which there is. You have to sign it, otherwise it's not valid. And assigned DC, and I refused to go to the station, so I was then reported for summons. Mr. Dacus immediately took to YouTube to broadcast his displeasure and disdain for what had occurred, and gave an inaccurate account on YouTube of what was said. Oh, God forbid you go on YouTube. I mean, bloody hell. From the YouTube clip, Here we go. From the YouTube clip, he clearly did not understand or listen to the process. Yes, and you have to understand the caution for it to be valid. You can't just mumble a couple of sentences and wander off. You had an improper caution and an illegal harassment order against me. The last attached email, which we're not going to get to see, is my attempt to explain the process to him in a manner he could read and reflect. Oh, sorry, police officer of wonderful vocabulary and obviously more intelligence than me. Idiot. This is last is I also pointed out many legitimate complaints. I pointed out that the Chief Constable, Graham Bright, etc. are potentially witnesses in the proceedings and he should refrain from contacting them. He retorted, dealing matters that I have no knowledge about in 30 years of frauds, etc. Well, you've got knowledge of 30 years of fraud now. What are you doing about it now? Nothing, because you're bent. D.S. Cook. I then received a tirade of abusive and insulting emails from Mr. Dacus which an attempt to rile me into an unprofessional reply. Yes, and I got you, mate. Whether you've been cleared or not, you broke the law. So I'd stop with the patronising if I were you. I replied to acknowledge receipt of them until I was told to refrain from replying as he had made complaints about me. I attached my emails to him. Again, we're not seeing them. We're not seeing his emails. I refuse to be drawn into debate with him as he clearly publishes our replies on YouTube in blog format, putting his slanted view on our replies. Bugger, that must only be the police side to the story. I've got this all wrong. Whatever they say is right. My views are just slanted. Oh, God. That's not... Dear. Yeah, so remember, don't ever go on YouTube or anything. The police don't like it. Ian Sims emailed me during the period when we were compiling evidence. He said that an email... He said in that email that he had made a statement he was not personally concerned by Paul Dacus. Oh, wait a minute. On the last page, everything I did was threatening behaviour, including sending a LinkedIn invitation, apparently. Luckily for me, because he wasn't personally concerned all of a sudden, this undermined the case. And they tried to prosecute me under harassment law, unsafe and not ethical, which should underline. Oh, I'm glad they realised it's not ethical. Oh dear. I have considered whether Mr. Dacus has a viable complaint and pondered whether to invite him to discuss this, but I am told by Inspector Lowings that this has been fully investigated. Again, no answer. There's never been an answer as to why they weren't investigated. They haven't been investigated. We know this. How am I doing for time? Oh, 8 minutes. Right, I'll just do this bit. Body cam footage, hopefully we'll get this in 3. On 23rd of October, the investigating officer viewed the body cam footage of the visit by DC Hurley and DC Bowen to Mr. Dacus' home. That footage is attached to Appendix C. Again, not allowed to see it. When viewed, it can be heard that DC Hurley introduces himself as DC Hurley and not Sergeant Hurley. Which was funny because neither of them introduced themselves. But they've kind of so far glossed over the bits about not showing their IDs either. DC Hurley then conducts the entire conversation on the doorstep with Mr. Dacus. DC Bowen speaks once and only to inquire whether Mr. Dacus would rather carry on the conversation inside the house, a suggestion Mr. Dacus declines. Well, given I've been threatened by the Police Crime Commissioner with violence, and I'm not really likely to trust coppers, am I? There is no footage of the front of either officer's clothing, but it can be heard that neither officer states they are sergeant or detective sergeant. Well, no, because they never even introduced themselves full stop. First thing they said to me was, "Are you aware this is being recorded?" DC Hurley, so he must have been the one at the front. I was just wearing my Black Force issued body armour over a shirt and tie. I may have had my warrant card and a lanyard round my neck, but I would not like to say for certain. No, that's because you know you didn't, mate. Apart from the body camera, I did not have anything else attached to my body armour, and definitely didn't have anything that would resemble Sergeant Chevron's. Which is, it's funny, because I do tend to recognise Sergeant Stripes. Right, part 3 coming up, don't go away, this is great stuff.